The story of Lazarus sits literally at the center of John's Gospel in chapter 11. The 10 chapters before it are called the Book of Signs and recount the miracles Jesus performed during his ministry. The 10 chapters after it are called the Book of Glory, narrating the events that lead to crucifixion. Glory, because in John's theology, the crucifixion is the moment when Jesus is glorified. It is the high point of God's love for us, who so loved the world that he gave his only Son. So the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11 is this hinge point between signs and glory, and it contains both. It is the final and greatest sign that Jesus performs, but it also prefigures his own glorious death and resurrection. This miracle also proves the catalyst by which the Jewish high priests finally decide that they must put Jesus to death. He's become too powerful, and his following will only grow until it's completely out of their control. If the Romans perceive the crowds who gather around Jesus as uppity, they won't discriminate between those Jews for Jesus and the other Jews, but they will punish the entire nation as a result. And so Jesus must be stopped. The raising of Lazarus thus becomes a crucial turning point in Jesus' narrative. Now, if this is the central story in John's Gospel, what is the story's central moment? On what does the whole structure hinge? Its crux is that silence after Jesus cries, "Lazarus, come out," and we wait to see what will emerge. Bethany sits on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, 2 miles from Jerusalem. As you and I walk with Jesus, we are met by Martha on a lonely road outside the village. "Lazarus is dead," she says. Already we know this. Jesus had told us before we set out on our journey. When Mary arrives with the other mourners, their ululating anguish precedes them, bouncing off the mountain, tingling up our spine. Jesus, overwhelmed, weeps. We've never seen that before. Miracles, blind men given sight, that we've seen, but never Jesus' tears. It unnerves us. For a moment, our confidence flags and we wonder, would a Messiah really cry? But then Jesus says, "Take me to him." We travel en masse to the tomb, the cave, where Lazarus has lain for 4 days. And 4 days means it's too late. He's beyond hope. We Jews know a dead person's spirit hovers around the neighborhood for 3 days before departing forever. Still, we hear Martha say, "Even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." The dusty path, the heat, those ululating cries continuing, fray our nerves. "Remove the stone." "But Lord, the stench." "Did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God?" Remove the stone. You and I start to shake, absolutely terrified. The stone is rolled away. Putrefaction hits us, and we turn away, covering our mouth and nose and gagging. Yet in the midst of all our groaning, Jesus gives thanks to God. And then he shouts, "Lazarus, come out." Slowly, we all turn our faces to the open tomb, mouths covered, eyes wide. And in the seconds that follow, his words echoing away, our gazes fixed upon the darkness in the cave, the mind of every one of us on those hills outside Bethany seizes on a single thought. My God, could this really be? Inside the tomb, it is dark. No light gets in. Sometimes we are Lazarus, sealed in a tomb of our own making, bound by burial cloths of our own winding, or assisted by others against our will. Who embalmed you? What binds you? Disappointment, sorrow, the bottle, declining health, grieving a loved one's death, unresolved anger, loneliness, unrequited love, shame. There are so many ways to live inside a tomb. I'd like to tell you about one of mine from a long time ago. It is ultimately a resurrection story, and though I did not ascend into heaven afterwards, I was given the chance to live again. I almost died in the summer of 1987, between my junior and senior years at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. 20 years old, closeted, lovelorn, convinced I was going to hell for being gay. I felt hopeless about the future. It was the night before I was supposed to start a summer job cleaning motel rooms, and I was terrified. See, a few times when I was a kid, I was given adult responsibilities I couldn't handle. Basically, left to babysit my passed out drunken father and keep him from leaving for the bars when he woke up. Failing at something like that when you're a child feels huge, and it makes you panicky about taking on even the simplest of responsibilities, the easiest of jobs, like cleaning motel rooms. I was so sure I would fail, just like when I was 7 years old. And I was convinced that my life would always be this way. So I got drunk that summer night, intending to jump into Lake Mendota and drown myself. I didn't know how to swim, and there was a short pier about 30 minutes away along the lakeshore path. Sometime after 2 a.m., I stumbled along that trail in the dark, listening to depressing songs by the Smiths on my Walkman, until I reached the pier. First thing I did was to sit down at its edge, hoping to trick myself into tumbling in all of a sudden without thinking. That didn't work. So I got up and walked back to the path to give myself a running start and leap into the lake by sheer momentum. I made a full-speed dash to the pier's edge, and then a strange thing happened. Just before reaching the end of the pier, I slammed into some sort of invisible wall and could go no further. I ran at the pier a few more times, but I could not break through that wall. At the time, I cursed myself and thought, you can't even do this right. Later, I decided that some primitive survival reflex must have kicked in and locked up my muscles at the last second. Much later, I knew. It was the hand of God, blocking my path to oblivion. After a while, I sat down on the pier and wept, exhausted. And it finally dawned on me how devastated my family and friends would have been. So I got up, went to a friend's place nearby, woke him up at around 5 a.m., and he walked me back to my apartment. Before that night, I had kept myself from being fully alive, hiding who I was and trembling before responsibilities. I laid me down in a tomb, the cloths of childhood failures and homophobia binding me. On the pier, I tried to roll the stone into place once and for all, and almost died in that tomb. But that night was a hinge point in my narrative. The invisible wall I hit was Jesus shouting, "Ricardo, come out!" Pretty quickly I realized it was either be myself and try moving forward or die. So I chose life. And through fits and starts and by the grace of God, here I am today, which is a resurrection of sorts. Like Lazarus, we are called forth from our tombs into new life. Whatever keeps you from being your true self binds you, lays claim to you. As it says in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. God wants you whole. St. Irenaeus wrote, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." If you've been entombed, find an exit strategy. Ask for help. Pray for release. If you've not been entombed, help someone who is. I believe that all of us who come to church deep down have the same reason for doing so. We long for healing and new life. And like Lazarus and those who loved him, we don't want to die without hope of transformation. Whether we find that in community or in worship or by simply showing up each Sunday with a hopeful heart, we are here to listen to the voice of God calling us into full life. Many years ago, the supervisor for my chaplaincy program at San Francisco General told us, patients really only have two questions for a visiting chaplain. Am I alone? And am I loved? Those same two questions are shouted every day from within our burial caves. Am I alone? Am I loved? More insistently in these final days of Lent as death draws near. The answer will come one day soon as we feel the rumbling of a stone being rolled back. In that moment, our questions echoing away, we will fix our gaze upon that lone shaft of light piercing our darkness, heart and throat, as we are seized by a single thought as that light shines into our lives. My God, could this really be?